Hello, everyone. Tim back, week 2, episode 1 is in the books. And now we embark on episode 2. First and foremost, guys, I just want to say this is a hobby for me. This is something that I did every week with a buddy of mine where, we met at a local bar, we talked, we had dozens of conversations, and every now and again, people in around us would kind of like join in and talk and share their take on certain topics, and they were some cases controversial, some cases they weren't. And unfortunately, that trip had to come to an end, and I had these thoughts swirling around in me, and I just wanted to get them out, so I came out with this podcast. And I didn't know how successful it was going to be, and I think in part of the reason I didn't know how successful it was going to be is because I really didn't care how successful it was going to be. This is just me in my mind talking to all of you. I'm talking to all of you. I'm enjoying time with all of you. I can't see you, I can't hear you, but I genuinely do feel like I'm talking to you. And as a testament to that, when I get the mentions on Twitter, when I get the mentions, and when I get the emails sent to me, when I, get conversations when people walk up to me, I really do appreciate it. It's really, really cool. And it's kind of like you can continue a conversation with somebody, even though you haven't seen them in person, and in some cases haven't met them at all. So I really want to say thank you for the overwhelming support. You really don't realize how many people are in your corner until you do something like this, until you start to climb that mountain. You get a lot of people say, "Oh, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. You can climb that mountain. Oh, I'm here for you. I support you." And in some cases, depending on who it's coming from, you like, yeah, whatever. I'll believe it when I see it. Other people, you genuinely do feel that way. You genuinely do feel that they have your back, that they're in your corner, that they have you. And sometimes you don't really get to fully convince yourself of that or witness that until you actually do something. When I did this podcast, when I launched the first episode, and before when I published it, I should say, and no one knew yet. I felt accomplished. I felt like this is awesome, this is cool, I can't believe I'm doing this. But when I finally got the word out, it was overwhelming. People, aside from the typical congratulations and good jobs, the people, I didn't really expect people to email in or people to mention me on, like, or email me or tweet me on Twitter. I didn't fully expect it, at least not this fast. I was going to wait for like a few episodes to be out. Um, and guys, I've just been really humbled and very grateful for the responses that I've got so far. So just to recap last week, so Tiffany Haddish, and correction, guys, I did mention it in the description, but just to kind of like go a step further and mention it here. So I misspoke and said Tiffany Haddish hosted the Oscars, the Grammys rather. She did not host the Grammys. It was a Grammy nomination show that she hosted. So that was a slip of the tongue on my part. I know I mentioned it a few times, but it was a Grammy night. So before the actual Grammys, they have this Grammy nomination show, and in the show, they announce, the different nominations for each category. And for Best Actor popped up, and Tiffany mispronounced Daniel Kaluuya's name. And as simple as some of you might think that is, and other people have voiced their opinion to me and tell me, no, that's a big deal. Mainly the people, some of them were biased, obviously. The people who said that it was a big deal were usually the people who had their name mispronounced their lives. But a lot of people made light of the situation because Tiffany's a comedian, she's a comic, she can kind of get away with that. How many of us grew up with class clowns who have said or done something that was questionable, but they got away with it because they were class clowns or goofy or just silly. Some people can get away with certain things, some people can't. I imagine that you guys let me get away with a lot on this show that other people can't, but that's just the nature of the beast. So a lot of people took it lightly. She's just having some fun. Another thing to consider, this was brought to my attention because I actually didn't notice. One of the listeners brought this to my attention. Thanks again for this feedback. That's in LA at like 5 in the morning. You don't realize it, but it's basically just a press event. There aren't any like average Joes there or actors there or what have you. And it's like at 5:30 in the morning on in LA. And I wouldn't blame anybody for messing up somebody's name at 5 in the morning. I'm just being honest with you. It's ridiculous. I mean, people mess up people's name at 12 in the afternoon or at 9 at night, uh, sober. Don't get me started on how much of a zombie I am when I first wake up. I can only imagine having to wake up, and this is showing at 5 in the morning. So who knows how early Tiffany woke up, what the flight was like beforehand. If she, or I know she's from South Central, and I think she actually does have a house in California. So I'm sure it wasn't like a huge a huge trip for her. But to think about that, she has to get ready. She has to wear what she's going to wear. It may take a little bit longer because you're in front of cameras. You have makeup. You have like, kind of like to get debriefed and what you can say, what you can't say. So many things going on. And it's like 5 in the morning. Well, of course. And especially someone's name you're not used to pronouncing it. But again, on the flip side, I got to be fair. Some people are like, hey, she should have been prepared. She knew she was doing this. She should have read the cards. She should have known the cards beforehand. She should have known how to pronounce the guy's name, yada, yada, yada. So there are a lot of people with a few different takes, and I eventually wrote into the topic of getting your name mispronounced. I mean, a lot of people have unique names, to say the least, very unique names, whether it be cultural, whether it be a nationality thing. Of course, if you're Hispanic, you're going to have a more traditional Hispanic name, maybe, especially if you're named after a relative. And I actually want to touch on that point a little later on in the show, and I would really like you guys' take on it. So, again, thanks for everybody who, uh, emailed in and tweeted at me. And for those of you who don't know, and I'll say a little bit more this time around, just so you know. So the email address is ITIYL@hotmail.com. Again, it's just like the show's name, just at hotmail.com. I'll talk if you'll listen at hotmail.com. And feel free to send me your thoughts, your feedback. If you love the show, you hated the show, you just want to say good job. If you want to say, Tim, you suck, you're horrible. If you want to tell me that the Patriots are going to win the Super Bowl, whatever you want to tell me, email that in, and I'll read some of the best responses on the next week's show, the following week's show. And I think you guys will get a kick out of some of the responses. I know I did. So at Twitter, you can follow me or tweet at me at ITIYL. So it's the acronym of I'll talk if you'll listen. So it's ITIYL _ ITIYL. So idle, idle _ idle on Twitter. You can't miss it. And I post links to the episode on Twitter as well to make it a little bit more accessible for you guys. So really excited about that. But without further ado, let's roll right into it and some of the responses that I got. Let's go ahead and bring this up here. And I apologize in advance if you hear the phone vibrating, as people are still emailing and some people are mentioning on Twitter as well. So I got some pretty cool responses in the email. Just to save time for what I wanted to talk about, I'm going to read two of them here, and I'm going to read one response that I got from Twitter. So my buddy Chuck, Charles, I think I'm like the only one that calls Charles Chuck, by the way, which is fine because that means I'm unique. I'm a VIP. So he wrote in and he says something. Again, this is something I want to touch on later on. I would love to get you guys' feedback. Remember, that's I'll talk if you'll listen at hotmail.com or ITIYL _ ITIYL at Twitter. So Charles writes in, I would definitely consider how the name of the child will affect that child's life. They are the one that must live with that name. and knowing how people perceive names, example, applying for jobs, this is something that has to be considered. Now, Chuck makes a really good point. Last week I posed a question. If you ever had your name mispronounced and you had a difficult name or unique name and everybody mispronounced your name and you got frustrated, you got angry, you went through what you went through growing up. When you have kids, if you have kids, would you consider that when you name your child? And then I kind of went on a rant about how some people get a little ridiculous with the names. And I know no one wants to say that, but here, let me say it. Let me take the heat for you guys. I'll say it. I know it's on your minds. I'll say it. Some people get ridiculous and overly creative with these names. And on one hand, I understand it. It's your child. You can name your child whatever you want. But you have to consider certain things. This isn't an inanimate object. This isn't, a coffee mug. This isn't a car. This isn't like a pet, like a dog or a parakeet or something. I don't know who has parakeets, but hey, sometimes you got to wing it. See what I did there? But anyway, so your child, this human that you've created, has to live with this for the rest of their life. They have to worry about all of the customers, all of the clients, all of the coworkers, all of the teachers, all of the colleagues mispronouncing their name. And that's something that I think you should really consider. Now, at the end of the day, I'm not saying don't name your child something unique. Don't name your child something that goes against the grain. But you should still consider that. A lot of people don't realize how impactful someone's name can be. So thanks, Chuck. Thanks again for that response. And that's a good point. I totally agree. I totally agree. You should definitely consider what you name your child, especially when it's time to apply for a job. So Brianna wrote in as well. Thank you so much. Just before the recording of this episode, actually. And she says, "Hello, Tim. I hope this email finds you well. I am well. Brianna, thank you. I'm very well. You know what? Thanks for asking. I really appreciate that. No, people just unlike Chuck, who just went right into his email. Thanks, Chuck. You didn't even ask me how I was doing. Brianna, on the other hand, does. So let's roll right into it. She says, I related a lot to the topic presented as someone with a non-traditional name. My first name, Brianna, is definitely not spelled in the common way. I've heard every possible pronunciation from Brina to Brendan to Brinana. I even had a teacher in middle school refuse to call me by my first name because he said it sounded snobby. Wow, that's powerful. When I was a kid, I found having my name mispronounced to be super annoying. Now I figured out ways to handle it better, such as going by a nickname instead. Bree. Bree rolls off the tongue. I totally get that. You want to shorten it, make it easier for people to say. During the episode, you asked why some people have bad attitudes when someone mispronounces their name. I think perhaps a reason for the frustration could be that person with the difficult name has to deal with people constantly mispronouncing their name. Unfortunately, they may happen to take out their frustration on a new person who doesn't necessarily deserve it. That person may just happen to be the 165th person who has mispronounced their name that day, and they're super frustrated. Of course, it would be ideal if people with non-traditional names were a bit more patient when asked about their name. Anyways, great first episode. I'm looking forward to the next one. Warm regards. But thank you so much. I think your regards are very warm. Thank you for... See, can we have more people to write in like this? She said she hoped the email found me well. And Bree sent me warm regards. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, Bree. I really appreciate the feedback. I'm glad you liked the first episode. And also kudos for the random number of 165 because that may be accurate depending on your line of work. And I think that's random enough to be true. Secondly, I totally agree. Bree makes some really good points here. So last week I mentioned that, hey, why are you so angry? Why, when someone mispronounces your name, you may have dealt with it for so long, but that's the first time that person's ever encountered you. And then I asked the question of, hey, what's the best way to respond to that? So that's a good point. Sometimes, we're only human, right? Sometimes you're only going to take your frustration out on whatever's in front of you at the time. If you have a bad day, if you're, you dropped your breakfast in the morning, if you didn't eat breakfast in the morning, you haven't had your coffee yet, you're only human. You're not a robot. You're not going to be nice to everybody that comes your way. So no, that's a really good point, Bree. And I think it's crazy that your teacher growing up said your name sounded snobby, so I'm not going to that's crazy. I'm glad you left that teacher's name out of it. Who knows if that teacher is still working. And this is middle school of all things. It's one thing if it's high school or college, you can kind of deal with it. You're a little bit thicker skin by that point, but in middle school, you're still kind of, getting things together. That's pretty rough. But thank you so much for that feedback. And, that's pretty cool that you provided a different perspective on it. But no, that's a good point. So again, guys, I'll talk if you'll listen at hotmail.com, and you can email in. You can email your thoughts in, just like Bree did, just like Chuck did. And you can also find me on Twitter at ITIYL _ ITIYL. I think I'm going to start saying idol. I think the cool kids will call it idol. I think that idol. Let me know what you guys think. Tweet at me. tweet at me and let me know what you think. Let me know if you're going to start saying idol. So thanks again, guys. Really appreciate that. Now, Charles, just to go back to Charles's point and just to reference a point that I had a conversation with someone else about last week's topic and mispronouncing your name. So Chuck's point about someone's name playing a huge factor when they're applying for a job. Now, no one wants to mention this. No one wants to say this, and I'm going to be the black sheep and say it. People, managers especially, absolutely positively go off of things as simple or as important as your name. Your name is oftentimes the first thing people see. If they don't get to meet you in person, they go to if they can't shake your hand in person. You have a job posting online. You post your application, your resume online. Reading from the top down, the first thing that you see is your name. That's just the first thing that you see. And it baffles me when people become so naive to the fact that, oh, my name shouldn't you know what? First and foremost, you're absolutely right. Your name should not define you as a person. However, I think it'd be very naive and almost really silly to think that it's not under consideration. If your name is, the name I used last week is Siobhan. And I went to school with a young lady whose name was Siobhan, and she spelled her name Siobhan. She pronounced it Siobhan, like Shavonne. I knew a Shavon growing up, Shayvon. So different variations there, but it's the first thing people see. If you walk into somewhere and you shake someone's hand, hello, how are you? There's a few things that they're looking at before they even get to your name. They're looking if you're well groomed. They're looking at what you're wearing. They're looking at how you carry yourself, your demeanor, if your handshake is strong and firm, if you're articulate. There's like a million different things that get considered, and I'm speaking from experience here, before they even get to your name. And then by the time that the name is the second, third, like, okay, hey, this person's name is, hard to pronounce or very unique, but they came in well dressed, they came in well groomed. This young lady's hair is in a bun, or it's straight and it's nice. This gentleman has on a tie. I don't care that this is a Zaim or a Kasir or something like that, because I'm not even thinking about that now. I'm thinking about what he can bring to the table, or what she can bring to the table. But when you're looking at Indeed, you're looking at these postings online, then yeah, you're gonna see things that you weren't exposed to before, and more importantly, you're going to see the name. So it's really naive to think that the name doesn't have an impact on getting hired at a job. And I actually had a young lady today, I'm sorry, not today, yesterday, come up to me, and she said, I hate my name. My name in the past, I felt like, there's no way you can really prove it, right? There's no statistic you can look at to prove. But she said she felt like her name has prevented her from getting certain jobs. She didn't want me to mention her name because it's a very unique name. She didn't want like things out of it. But she said she's not going to change her name, and she respects her name because she was named after a family member. But she said she hates that name, and that family member is no longer living. So she said it would be kind of disrespectful to change her name. But she said she hated her name. And she says she almost cringes whenever she has to introduce herself to a prospective employer because of her name. And of course, one will argue there's other factors that's going in there. We already mentioned how you can be dressed and how you present yourself. But she says she hates her name. She's very young, like she's college educated, um, you know, very decorated. She's involved in some nonprofit organizations, so she's got a good head on her shoulders. But how crazy is that? Where her herself. I mean, think about it. It's two sides of the same coin. And please, guys, please email me your thoughts on this topic because I know that you got polar opposites with this topic. You got some people who are like, no, I totally agree. Your name can definitely define who you are as a person to a degree, and your name can definitely have a significant impact on your job and where you choose to work at. But another person, can say, well, no, your name shouldn't define who you are as a person. You don't never judge a book by its cover, which is a phrase I hate, by the way. In some cases, you absolutely have to judge a book by its cover. But the point is, hey, don't make assumptions or judgments about somebody before you even get a chance to meet them. No, I totally agree. I totally agree. But at the same time, I think it'd be really naive to sit here and think that employers, and this is regardless of background, I'm talking Asian, I'm talking black, I'm talking whether you're from Europe or you're from Mexico or you're from freaking Iceland. If you look at someone, you be naive to think that these employers all over the world don't look at your resume and go, James versus Tyrone, subconsciously at least. So it's a very, very, very real factor. And you're gonna have a lot of unique names being celebrated, especially because of Black History Month coming up. Especially, you're gonna have a lot of people who take pride in things like their name, who view it as a part of their culture and their race and their heritage, which in a lot of cases it is. So I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. Remember, it's at ITIYL underscore ITIYL on Twitter, or again, the cool kids, idol. And on the email, I'll talk if you'll listen at hotmail.com. Please email me because I really want to talk about this, guys. This is pretty profound. And what are your thoughts about that? That was when she said that to me. That was so powerful because you'd be surprised how many people are just naive to that. Like so many people are just like, oh, my name is just my name. I mean, I like my name. I'm proud of my name, but it's just my name. It has no impact. There are people out there walking around like that. Heck, some of you might even think that. But then there's other people like the young lady I spoke with, and she was just like, she amazed me. She really shocked me. I've never heard anyone say, I hate my name and was serious about it. She was serious about it. And the one factor, and it just goes how much respect she has towards that family member. She says literally that's the only reason why she still has her name. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Wow, that's crazy. Feel free to email me again. That's I'll talk if you'll listen at hotmail.com. I'm really excited to hear from you guys and read some of you guys' thoughts and opinions. So on that note, I'll go ahead and exit. And again, guys, really appreciate the feedback. Really appreciate everything. And I will talk to you all next week. Take care.